It all started in a certain rich man's house. Ademola's mansion in Lekki was buzzing with excitement. It was his 10th birthday, and his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adedeo, had thrown him a grand party. The expansive garden was filled with colorful decorations, a bouncing castle, and tables laden with all kinds of food and drinks. The guest list included the crème de la crème of Lagos society, rich businessmen, celebrities, and their children. Ademola's mother, Mrs. Adedeo, was known for her elegance and grace. She wore a beautiful, sparkling dress that matched her vibrant personality. She was always the perfect host, making sure everyone was having a good time. Among the many presents Ademola received, one stood out, a small, intricately designed box from his grandmother. Inside was a golden bracelet, studded with diamonds. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. Mrs. Adedeo immediately recognized its value and importance. "Ademola, this bracelet is very special," she said, kneeling down to his level. "It belonged to your great-grandfather. You must take good care of it." Ademola nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. He promised to keep it safe. As the party continued, children ran around, playing games and enjoying the festivities. Ademola, excited and distracted, joined his friends in a game of hide and seek. In the midst of the fun, he took off the bracelet and placed it on a table near the pool, intending to wear it again later. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. Guests started to leave, and the party began to wind down. Ademola suddenly remembered the bracelet. He ran to the table by the pool, but it was gone. Panic set in. Ademola searched frantically, but there was no sign of the bracelet. He ran to his mother, tears welling up in his eyes. "Mummy, I can't find the bracelet," he cried. Mrs. Adedeo's heart sank. She knew how precious the bracelet was, not just for its material value but for its sentimental worth. She immediately called for everyone to help search. Mr. Adedeo quickly organized a search party. The house staff, security guards, and remaining guests spread out, looking in every nook and cranny of the mansion and garden. The mood turned from joyous to tense. "Check the pool area again," Mrs. Adedeo instructed, trying to stay calm. "And make sure to ask everyone if they've seen it." Ademola's best friend, Chidi, joined the search. He felt bad for his friend and wanted to help. They retraced their steps, looking under tables, behind chairs, and in the bushes. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, one of the security guards found a small clue. A tiny piece of the bracelet's clasp near the hedge. It looked like someone had tried to hide it. Mrs. Adedeo examined the piece closely. "This means someone must have taken it," she said, her voice steady but determined. "We need to find out who." Mr. Adedeo nodded in agreement. "Let's check the security cameras," he suggested. The family gathered in the security room, watching the footage from the party. They saw children running around, guests mingling, and the vibrant activities of the day. Finally, they spotted Ademola placing the bracelet on the table by the pool. Moments later, a shadowy figure appeared, quickly grabbing the bracelet and disappearing into the crowd. "Pause it there," Mr. Adedeo said. They zoomed in, but the image was too blurry to identify the person. Who could it be? Ademola wondered aloud. Mrs. Adedeo sighed. "We need to be careful. Let's not accuse anyone without proof." Mrs. Adedeo had an idea. "We will offer a reward," she said. "No questions asked. Maybe the person who took it will return it." Mr. Adedeo agreed, and they quickly spread the word. News of the missing bracelet and the reward spread like wildfire through Lekki. Ademola watched anxiously as the hours passed. He hoped the plan would work and that his special bracelet would be found. The day, at Lekki International School, a 9-year-old girl named Titi sat alone on the steps of the school building. Her parents, both high-powered executives, were often late to pick her up due to their busy work schedules. Today was no different. Titi was used to waiting, but it was getting dark, and she felt a little anxious. The school was almost empty, except for a few teachers and the security guard. She pulled out her phone and dialed her mother's number. It went straight to voicemail. Not again, she muttered, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. Just then one of the teachers, Mrs. Okoro, approached her. "Titi, are your parents late again?" she asked kindly. Titi nodded. "Yes, ma. They promised they would be on time today, but they're not here yet." Mrs. Okoro sighed. "Would you like me to call them?" "No, thank you. I've already tried. I'll just wait a bit longer," Titi replied, trying to sound brave. Mrs. Okoro smiled. "You're a strong girl, Titi. But if they don't come soon, let me know and I can give you a ride home." "Thank you, ma," Titi said, appreciating the offer. As the minutes ticked by, Titi began to worry more. Finally, she decided to take Mrs. Okoro up on her offer. Just as she was about to speak, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the school gate. It was Mr. Adedeo, returning from the search at his house. "Titi," he called out. "What are you doing here so late?" "Uncle Adedeo," Titi exclaimed, relieved to see a familiar face. "My parents are late again." Mr. Adedeo frowned. "Hop in. I'll take you home. It's not safe to be here alone." Titi thanked Mrs. Okoro and climbed into the car. As they drove, she noticed how tense and preoccupied Mr. Adedeo seemed after he glanced through his phone to see a missed call from his son Ademola. "Uncle, is everything okay?" she asked. He sighed. "We've had a bit of a problem at the house. Ademola's special bracelet is missing and he had been throwing tantrums about because of it, even after I promised to buy a better one for him." When they arrived at Titi's house, Mr. Adedeo walked her to the door and waited until she was safely inside. Titi thanked him again and watched as he drove away, deep in thought. The next day, Titi couldn't stop thinking about the missing bracelet. She remembered how excited Ademola had been about his birthday present. She decided to visit Ademola after school to see if she could help in any way. After school, Titi went to Ademola's house. She found him sitting in the garden, looking glum. "Hi, Ademola," she greeted him. "I heard about the bracelet. I'm so sorry." Ademola looked up and managed a small smile. "Thanks, Titi. It's been a really tough time. Can I help? Maybe we can look around together," Titi suggested. Ademola nodded. "I'd like that." As they searched the garden, Titi noticed something shiny near the hedge where the piece of the clasp had been found. She crouched down and carefully pulled it out. It was a small, diamond-studded charm, clearly part of the bracelet. "Ademola, look. I found this," she exclaimed, holding up the charm. Ademola's eyes widened. "That's part of it. Where did you find it?" "Over here by the hedge," Titi said. "Maybe the person who took it dropped this." Ademola called for his mother, and Mrs. Adedeo quickly joined them. When she saw the charm, she looked hopeful. "This is definitely from the bracelet. Good job, Titi." Mrs. Adedeo called the security team to search the area more thoroughly. They combed through the hedge and surrounding bushes, hoping to find more clues. "Titi, you've been very helpful," Mrs. Adedeo said, smiling at her. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Titi's face lit up. "Yes, please. I'd love to help more if I can." As the search continued, Titi and Ademola went inside to wash up. They chatted about school, their favorite games, and their families, growing closer as friends. Dinner was a lively affair. Mrs. Adedeo prepared jollof rice with grilled chicken, and Titi couldn't help but notice how kind and welcoming everyone was. As they ate, the security team continued their search outside. Suddenly, one of the guards rushed in, holding a piece of fabric. "Madam, we found this near the back gate," he announced, handing it to Mrs. Adedeo. She examined the fabric closely. "This looks like it belongs to the uniform of the security company we hired last week," she said, a frown forming on her face. Mr. Adedeo, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Call the company and get a list of all the guards they've sent here in the past week. We need to find out who this belongs to." Ademola and Titi exchanged worried glances. "Do you think one of the guards took the bracelet?" Ademola asked. "It's possible," Mr. Adedeo replied. "But we need to be sure before accusing anyone." Later that night, after Titi had gone home, Ademola couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the missing bracelet and the fabric they had found. Around midnight, he heard a noise outside his window. His heart raced as he peeked through the curtains. He saw a shadowy figure moving towards the back gate. Quietly, Ademila slipped out of his room and woke his parents. "Dad, I saw someone outside near the back gate," he whispered.